The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
Well, hello. Welcome to Spindle City Straight Talk. It is Monday, Halloween in the Riv. I'm Chip.
And I'm CJ.
And if you see anybody with a mask like this knocking on your door, it is not me. Okay? Because I don't do trick-or-treating. But if you want to give me candy, Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, and Hershey with either almonds, cherries, raspberries, or anything in it. I don't like plain, I'll eat plain Hershey, but I'm a chocoholic. So those are my, and of all, kind of a public service announcement. It is Halloween, and I know there's a few things put together for children, but if you're taking your children out to actually trick-or-treat door to door, please be very careful. It's always been an issue, but today with the stuff that's flying around in the country, be very aware of what your children are getting before they eat it.
I agree. And there are a lot of events going on. There's one over at the Recreation Center, which is the old courthouse, 45 Rock Street tonight. There is a stroll, which is going on. I believe that's on Bradford Avenue between Broadway and Bay Street, where the old tennis courts used to be. And there's a little parade that it's city oriented. There's also a merchants Halloween going on downtown Fall River. Not a lot of businesses, but they would like you to
by the businesses.
Go by the businesses and pick up some candy for your kids and see what happens.
No, those are good things. Especially in today's life, but even them, if they're buying candy, you got to be aware of everything today.
Oh, yeah.
It's so bad. But these events that are put together, they used to have churches, used to have Halloween parties and things like that. And those things are always better because they're in a controlled environment.
Right.
Going door to door today is difficult. But I noticed that there's not a lot in Fall River anymore trick-or-treating.
No, there isn't.
If you go to Somerset and the more affluent areas, that they bust them over there and let them trick-or-treat over there.
Well, what's interesting is the Highlands actually do get people.
Well, it's the Highlands.
It's the Highlands, of course.
Highlands, of course.
But the past 14 years that I've been at my house, 15 years now, nobody's ever knocked on my door. I have candy. Chocolate, obviously. That's if Chip comes over my house, you know.
I buy Reese's Peanut Butter Cups and candies, and I keep them so I can eat them. I buy them so I can eat them.
Right, and my tenants, they've got kids. They come down the stairs, and I always give them something. But for the most part, I don't buy a lot of candy anymore because there's just not a lot of people.
Well, I wonder if our director of operations or potential director will be coordinating all this stuff, because I guess today they were talking about it. I got a phone call before the show. They were talking about that being straightening things out, like storage of things. I mean, Paul the Punisher, he punishes the taxpayer, strikes again. This guy, you can tell he's from the school department. They know nothing but how to create jobs.
Right.
I had somebody call me, and look at this, somebody told me this, so if it's inaccurate by one or two, they said that principals have got 2 vice principals, and then they got 6 other assistant principals or something. It's like 10 people to do the job of 1. And now this director of operations, this is absurd. Another job, another health care, providing them with health care and benefits forever, to do what? Director of operations? You got department heads in every department that are being paid big money to run their department. What is a director? Can you get a director of operations? Look, you can't be a president of the United States or a governor without having a cabinet. because nobody can know everything within a nation or even a state. So guess what? How are you going to have somebody in charge of operations? Does he know anything about fire operations? Does he know more than a fire chief? If he does, get rid of the fire chief. Does he know more than a police chief about police? Does he know more about DCM than the head of DCM? Does he know more about cemeteries than the cemetery guy?
Well, the cemetery guy's doing planning now too.
But see, therein lies the rub, as the bard said. We hired an ice house guard for DCM.
Right.
And then we wondered why he couldn't run a department.
Right.
This is the problem. And I know that we have an effective police chief and an effective fire chief, because I know people in those departments. And from what I've been told from my contacts in DCM, DCM's being run fairly adequately now.
With a temporary director.
So why do we need somebody in charge of all these people? Because what is he going to do? Walk into the fire department and go, oh, hey, chief, how are things going? Okay, good. Oh, yeah. Well, you know something? Maybe you can move the toilet paper. I think there's a better way to store the toilet paper. I mean, this is ludicrous. Can you find another way to blow the taxpayers' money, Paul? I don't know. If you can, you'll find it. Believe me.
Oh, I'm sure.
You've done nothing. So I just had to get that in because I'm furious with this thing. And of course, let's see what the council does with this thing.
Well, actually, I think they've already approved that position.
Yeah.
In a previous meeting of the Ordinance and Legislative Committee. Now, the interesting thing is, as you know, obviously this is a job for one of Paul's friends.
Of course it is.
Okay.
And a useless job.
And a useless job at that. And I said that when the job was officially offered. But to make it just for storage, it just.
Well, they said it helped store.
I understand
but
that.
I mean, but let's face it. It's more accurate than
Right.
saying he's going to be director of what operations
Right.
is he going to direct?
City operations.
City operations, which includes fire operations, which he has no expertise in, or at least I would say that, because if he had any expertise, he'd be a fire chief.
Right.
Or police, because he'd be a police chief. Or DCM, which he would be in charge of some DCM somewhere.
Correct.
So this is just another, this is typical school department. What can we create? Oh, that's right. When I was in college, I had a dean of students. Let's make a dean of students. We can get another job, give another one of our friends a job, pay him big money to be in charge of middle school kids. Yes, all middle school kids go to their dean of students to discuss whether they should take physics or not next semester.
Yeah.
Right? Of course, CJ. Yep. This guy's just, look, like I said, it's the worst mayor we've ever had, bar none, because he does absolutely nothing except create jobs and spend money. And he never addresses any issues.
I agree. I got to take some time out before we get to question 2.
Okay.
Response times.
Ah, geez. Oh, I know where you're going with this one.
Effective tomorrow, the mayor's pulling the EMS personnel out of the neighborhood fire stations and putting them in the central station on Bedford Street, except for the Flint Rainey Station, 1 unit up at Commerce Way.
The north end.
Yeah, the north end, right.
Of course.
And my question is, and I said this in the Weekend Flush, what's the response time going to be? Somebody has a heart attack, and it takes 5 minutes or 10 minutes for them to get from Bedford Street to that patient. That patient's dead. Now, to fit all of those ambulances in Central Station, all the fire apparatus, except for the pumper, and Marine 1 and Rescue 1, are out of that building.
Yeah, look, this is the biggest boondoggle I've ever seen, and it's a political thing. And the sad part about it, it could cost lives. Number one, I presented, God, it must be 20 years ago now, when I was the president of the union, I presented a 5-year plan to change the positioning of the fire stations to enhance response times, because in the old days we had neighborhood schools because people didn't have cars to drive to school. They didn't have major bus services and things. They also had fire stations everywhere within neighborhoods because they had horse-drawn apparatus. Now we have, obviously, motorized apparatus. And what they realized is that having apparatus in the middle of the city delays response time anyway, even though they have a shorter distance to go because of traffic and stuff. So what they started doing is, think about a wheel and the spokes of a wheel. They began to put fire stations on the outer perimeter of cities, because then when they leave, initially they've got various routes they can take, and they're hitting fairly clear roadways. They're not going to get, like, let's look at the Central Station. They're going to come out the door and they're going to hit Bedford Street at 5 o'clock when everybody's getting out of work and traffic's backed up everywhere. Nobody can go anywhere. They're going to have to drive up on the sidewalks and stuff. And that delays, plus they've moved it from the south end to the center of the city. And the reality in that is seconds can cost lives, whether it's at a fire or at a medical emergency or a police emergency. You know that, I know that, anybody with a brain knows that. I don't know who came up with this bonehead thing.
Well, according to the mayor, it's to increase efficiencies.
It doesn't increase. How do you increase efficiency?
I couldn't figure that out
myself.
myself.
It would be like if you know there's a sniper in a tree, you put everybody standing together so he doesn't have to look for them.
Right.
You stick all these efficient. How does it increase efficiency?
Well, according to Oliveira, who's the director of EMS, he says it's going to create more camaraderie amongst the EMS personnel.
Well, that is the biggest line of BS I've ever heard in my. Who cares? Listen, let me explain something. It's a job, a very important job. You don't have to have camaraderie there. What you need is a standard operating procedure, rules and regulations, and you have to. Those ambulances have been running out of fire station. They got plenty of camaraderie in a fire station the old way, because they were friendly with the firefighters. We had ambulances running out of our stations all the time. They sat at the same table and had dinner. Camaraderie amongst themselves. Why? Is this a club? Or is this a job? The reality is the placement of apparatus is the most critical thing. Response time and manning are the two most critical factors in the mitigation of property loss and life safety. You have to have apparatus adequately maintained, and you have to have adequate response times. As a matter of fact, when I did that 5-year plan, we had the International Association of Firefighters. They have an actual computer program. What you do is you give them a map of the city, and you give them, and what they do is they take that map, they feed it into the computer, and the computer tells you where you should have, they give you suggestions where to put these stations, so you will, and they draw their radius, their circle, to see this one will overlap, this one will overlap. You're covering the entire city within the NFPA's guidelines for response time. It's the most effective way, because then you minimize any kind of stuff that's going to go with traffic. Listen, they can try to spin it. Camaraderie's got nothing to do with it. I don't care. I didn't care if the crews got along and they wanted to go out drinking beer. They were there to do a job. That's not a club. It's a profession. You go in there, you work, and you're there to save lives and protect people. That is BS, and believe me, that irritates me.
I agree, and like I said, I have a major issue with response times with these ambulances, because the ambulance in my neighborhood was at Candace Niagara Fire Station. We won't have one anymore effective tomorrow. I spoke to the neighborhood director, Helen Rigo, who was furious because She hadn't been consulted. She wasn't told about it. She had to find out from people like me.
Yeah, justifiably so. She should be infuriated.
Right, and that's the problem with this. The mayor does everything backdoors. Now, according to rumor, this was signed off by the fire union president, IAFF 1314 president. Okay? And it was, I don't know if it was endorsed or it was accepted by Jason Burns.
Well, they can endorse anything they want. If they think they can justify this with the response times and stuff like that, and I don't care what they say, you're sticking them all in there, and because you can already tell, you don't see any actual reason for the job for doing this. The reason was morale. The same people, these people are supposed to be union officials. Better go back and read their IAFF stuff when they were talking about and had videos about response times and about manning levels and about things like this. This is what's critical in a situation, an emergency. And you can tell they were both lieutenants, not chiefs. I can tell you from experience the value of response time, because the analogy I used was when people, because I remember Dawson said, it doesn't make any difference, they'll get there. Ultimately, you'll have the number that is required ultimately. And the analogy I used is it's like playing a football game, and I tell you, listen, you can only have 2 players on a field. We're going to play 11-2 because you're going to get the other 9 players at some point in time. Over the next 4 quarters, you're going to get the other 9 players. Well, guess what? By the time you get all 11 people on the field, you're going to be behind 172-0.
Right.
And the problem is, I can tell you, and you will know this, your aunt.
Yes. Yep.
That was my fire. She threw 2 babies out of a 3rd floor window. And Ernie Doobie went up that ladder and rescued her. We only had about 3 minutes. We could hold that fire back because it was already wrapping into that window. We had to push it back with lines and give rescue. And I told them, you can only search for like 2 rooms. I said, you got to get out of there because we're going to lose you too.
Right.
And that building is only about 3 blocks from the Globe Fire Station.
Right.
And if I was coming from the center, those 2 babies and your aunt would have been dead.
Yeah, I know, believe me. And that's why I wanted to bring this up. So call your mayor and complain about the response times of the ambulances already and why it's done. And the reason this was done also was that they are going to separate EMS from the fire department, which, if you remember, a couple of years back, they're merging the departments so that the EMS personnel could get Group 4 status.
And who was there saying they were going to merge them? Jason Burns.
Jason Burns, right. So it makes for an interesting time. Well, now we're on to question 2.
Let's get on question 2.
Question 2. Question 2 is proposed would direct the Commissioner of the Massachusetts Division of Insurance to approve or disapprove the rates of dental benefit plans and would require that a dental insurance carrier meet an annual aggregate medical loss ratio for its covered dental benefit plans of 83%. The medical loss ratio would measure the amount of premium dollars a dental insurance carrier spends on its members' dental expenses and quality improvements as opposed to administrative expenses. If a carrier's annual aggregate medical loss ratio is less than 83%, the carrier would be required to refund the excess premium to its covered individuals and groups. Now, we have major groups supporting a yes and no vote. Now, the people supporting a yes vote are the American Dental Association, the Massachusetts Dental Hygienists Association, Mass Senior Care, Mass Dental Society, the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry, and the Massachusetts Nurses Association, which I found interesting.
Well, yeah. What I also see at the bottom on this vote yes, paid for by, and the thing that bothers me about this stuff, because I look at this and look, this aggregate all this other stuff and the machinations, but I look at who's really paying. Now we have the California Dental Association.
Right.
And the New York State Dental Association. When out-of-towners come in here
There's
to
something
support something that they say is good for us, my innate distrust of government the red flag flies up. This is what I looked at this and requires dental, companies to spend 83. Who are they that are required to spend how much or how do they spend their money? They're going to regulate those people. Those are businesses. They're going to do whatever the hell they want to make a profit, and we know that. But
well, according to the dental groups that want you to vote no, the dental insurers, I should say,
Yeah.
they currently spend 90%
that's right.
of the premium on dental care. So that might be a misrepresentation.
Yeah.
Now, the yes people want you to, protect your patients against large dental insurance premium increases by giving the state insurance commissioner the power to disapprove the rate increases above the consumer price index. Well, on the no side, question 2 could increase dental costs as much as 38% for families and businesses.
Yeah.
Question 2 will result in more people will stop going to the dentist if dental costs go any higher. Check the facts. I mean, you got to look at these things.
Yeah.
And one of the I'm supporting a no vote on this, by the way, for 2 reasons. Number 1, out-of-state organizations should not be dictating to us. Number 2, I firmly believe that what's going to happen with this, and I've heard this directly from some of the insurance companies when they were posed with this, is that they're going to increase their rates dramatically to make the money back that they're going to lose on the 83%. And while the insurance commissioner can restrict it, if they go up on the CPI every year, it's going to happen. Okay? And what's going to happen is plans are going to also have fewer benefits. There's nothing in this bill that says the benefits have to be maintained the same. They don't. So if they're going to force them to spend so much money on care or give premiums back, then they're going to cut back on the care.
No, you're right. And I look at this, and the first thing paid for by Committee to Protect Access to Dental Care on no. But the thing look, we have dental in Fall River. And that's actually Delta, who was one of the, I believe,
They're one of the supporters.
they're one of the supporters of a no vote.
Correct.
And let me tell you something about dental insurance. It stinks. They're talking about increase in rates. It's true, because we have 3 plans. The first plan is very cheap, but you get nothing, basically, except they pay 50% of basically your 2 annual checkups. If you get anything else, you got to go to Tier 2 or Tier 3, which you're paying a substantial amount of money, and even that doesn't cover you 100%. But if you've got young kids and they need braces and stuff, I was fortunate enough not to have a lot of problems with my teeth growing up. But then, obviously, as you get older, I didn't have it for a while, but I ended up having 2 root canals in 1 year. And you know how expensive those things are. And I exhausted my insurance virtually halfway through the first root canal in the crown. And then, you know what I was told? Talk about dental insurance or something I didn't know, and because I deal with healthcare.
Right.
I went in for the cost of the crown, because I had gotten one with the first one, and it was a lot higher. And I said, that's not the price that I paid for the last one. It's only like 6 months ago. They haven't changed any rates, because we've looked at it. You know what they told me? They said, no. They said, yeah, it's because you've exhausted your dental insurance, and now we can charge you anything we want. Right? So they're going to charge me more. Now, if either that or suffer with a tooth that's going to kill you, like they said, people are going to forego, suffer with a tooth until the following year so you can get some compensation. Look, dental care is tough, because dental care isn't like medical care. They are not as well regulated, but there are certain things that this makes no sense. And like I said, when I see New York and especially New York and California, the 2 bastions of overregulation, to me, the best way to control this is competition. Have as many dental dental plans as possible and let them fight over your business, and they might give you a little bit better deal. But I look at this, California Dental Association, New York Dental Association. Think about those two states. They are the most severely regulated states, the highest tax states in the nation. And they want you to take this and tell you they're making you a deal. And like you say, vote your conscience, do your research. But it's hard to research this stuff because unless you get into the billing processes and somebody sits down for like 6 months and explains all this stuff. I'm just looking at what I can look at and doing as much research as I can. But I'm with you, CJ. I'm a no on this one, too.
Well, and think about this. If a yes vote prevails, the rate increases are going to be based on the CPI.
Yeah.
Look at what the CPI is right now.
Oh, yeah.
So much so, it was so high that Social Security recipients are getting the highest increase, cost of living COLA, that they've gotten in years. They thought last year's was high. This year's is even higher. But last year's was high, but they took it away in Medicaid dollars. And this year, they're probably going to do the same thing. So think about that when you're looking at this, because inflation being the way it is, I mean, these insurance rates can go up based upon that CPI. And people are going to say, I can't afford it anymore. And like you said, some of the plans have absolutely no coverage. Absolutely no coverage.
Yeah.
And I don't want to hear from people, well, you know, these people who are on Medicaid, which is Mass Health, they get everything, including dental care. No, they don't. You know what they get on Medicaid for dental care? Cleanings once a year, okay? X-rays once a year, and necessary fillings. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Nothing else. You need a root canal, you pay for it. You need a crown, you pay for it. You need an implant, you pay for it.
Things are
and they're not cheap.
Oh,
exactly.
They are not cheap.
They're not cheap. So remember that when you start looking at these questions. I personally believe that a no vote should prevail because, number one, I don't believe the government should be regulating how I get care at all. Let's look at how they're doing with the car insurance. Okay? You get into one accident, your rate goes up, $500, $600. Okay? It's not good. It's not good because the policies become unaffordable. So people who have cars can't have a car anymore. And that's a shame. This is what will happen here. The insurance rates will go up. People won't be able to afford the insurance. They'll stop that, and then they'll stop dental care.
Well, since we got into this and we got just a little time left, we talk about if you want to trust government to spend your money wisely and regulate it for your good, for your benefit, not their benefit. What was that thing you were talking to me about, the MBTA?
$526 million after receiving $2 billion from the federal government.
Okay, everybody, remember that. Remember we showed you that article from the Boston Herald that said they were going to be around $450 million this year. They're going off the cliff. Well, they just kept spending money like Paul. So now it's not $450 million, it's $526 million.
Correct.
After they got $2 billion in COVID assistance. So that means they were actually $2,526 million in debt. And what did the director say? They're going off the cliff.
Exactly. And now here's the funny part about it. All of those shortfalls are before maintenance, safety, and expansion of the service, like the South Coast Rail.
Exactly.
Okay? So with those three items added to the budget,
We're looking at $1 billion.
yeah, you're looking at some hefty money. And the state legislature has been guilty because they haven't been putting money into the budget to handle the safety issues. So how can the train be safe? I don't know.
Why should they?
Right.
They don't have to ride the T. They got their House and Senate plates. They can use the high occupancy vehicle lane even if they're alone.
Yep. And remember, they're getting their 45% increase at the 1st of January. Well, I want to thank you all for watching. Remember, stay safe, stay angry, and hold your politicians accountable. Have a happy Halloween and stay safe tonight.